Hello, friends! Today I'm going to tell you about the animated film Saving Bikini Bottom. Leave a like if you enjoy our videos. Andy Chick's morning begins, as usual, with a song. After finishing expressing her love for science and Bikini Bottom, the sea squirrel notices a digger bucket descending from the sky onto their peaceful town. It scoops up all the buildings and residents except for Sandy and SpongeBob. Sam's beloved horse, Spark, was split in half during the process. Sandy swore to return the back half to the front half. SpongeBob was also affected. His friends and his beloved snail, Gary, remained in Bikini Bottom, while he and Sandy were still down on the seabed. That's when he learned that Sam's words are never empty. She quickly discovered that the excavator that had taken the town to the surface belonged to the Chobot Laboratory, where she once worked. Decoded, the name stands for Private Oceanographic Biological Laboratory of Texas. That's exactly where Sandy planned to go. But first, she tried contacting the laboratory and found out that Chobot was now a branch of a water park. The owner was a woman named Tsunami. Hearing this, Sandy became seriously angry. She decided to rush to Bikini Bottom's rescue. The fastest way to Texas was by plane. To get on one, they needed to use an underwater geyser. One had just appeared in the spot where the excavator left a big hole. After making the necessary calculations, Sandy told SpongeBob to grab a shell and jump into the rising column of water. That's how they ended up on the wing of a plane, and SpongeBob began to suffer. Being on the surface was drying him out, so Sandy applied her own homemade moisturizing lotion on him. After that, SpongeBob started grilling sausages, which reminded him of Squidward, while Sandy began new calculations, figuring out the right moment to jump to land in the water park. When she was done, she and SpongeBob leapt from the plane. Turns out, Sandy is a flying squirrel. They were preparing to land when a Texas tornado swept them far from their destination. On the ground, they discovered they had over 1,000 kilometers to travel to the city with the water park. But Sandy didn't lose hope. She had been through worse. Meanwhile, M.R. Krabs left his diner to check if Bikini Bottom was safe. On the way, he met Gary and then saw something huge and disgusting in the sky. He was so scared that he bolted back to his restaurant and boarded up the door. However, the monster he saw wasn't all that terrible. It was Phoebe, an employee of the laboratory. She and Kyle had once worked with Sandy, but were now under Tsunami's control. When they realized SpongeBob was missing from Bikini Bottom, they became very worried. You see, that yellow sponge was exactly who their boss wanted. When Tsunami showed up with her pet fish, she became furious to learn that Bob was gone. Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Sandy were on their way, but then hungry snakes attacked. Sandy fought them off, using a 1970s Wonder Woman-style spin to transform into a black mamba costume and taking on the dangerous reptiles. But as she delivered the final blow, the snake leader bit her paw. The venom caused her to swell up, but she managed to whistle loudly, a Special Cheeks family whistle that obligated relatives to rush to the collar. Sure enough, her family came to the rescue, defeated the snakes, and returned her to normal. The Cheeks family were circus performers traveling in their own vehicle. When they learned Sandy needed to save her friends, they agreed to drive her to the water park. At that moment in Chobot, Tsunami was furious. Her Sea Friends project was at risk. She had always been upset that you couldn't hug fish and other sea creatures like puppies or kittens. Her plan was to make sea animals terrestrial by teaching them to breathe air. That way, children could play with them. To do this, she fed Bikini Bottom's residents special supplements. Once the herbal blend took effect, she'd use equipment to alter their DNA so they could breathe air. Then she'd clone them, and the originals would disappear. Back in the Cheeks' car, trouble struck when a raccoon caused a breakdown. But the squirrels quickly repaired it and drove on. SpongeBob learned that Sam's relatives weren't thrilled when she became a scientist and went to live underwater. They'd have been happier if she'd stayed with them in the circus. Meanwhile, Bikini Bottom residents had eaten their fill of the supplements and were caught with Net's Mister. Krabs, Squidward, and Patrick were captured, transformed into air breathers, and placed in a mock-up of their homes. Children were let in to play with them, pulling, stretching, and tossing them around. Back with the Cheeks family, the police gave chase. They had a sack of stolen nuts in the trunk. Sandy scolded Randy for stealing and threatened him with an acorn in the whole punishment. The chase escalated when a tornado lifted their car, but then another swept up the police vehicle. Riding the tornadoes, Sandy used her lasso to slow theirs down, dropping them safely. Still pursued by helicopters and police cars, the family launched Sandy and SpongeBob from a cannon toward the water park. Sandy used her body and water skis to slow their landing. After landing, they looked for the lab, but soon Nama's dog attacked, forcing them to flee into storm drains. A gush of water flushed them into the lab sink. Sandy saw Bikini Bottom residents trapped in an aquarium and was horrified. SpongeBob, however, was happy to see Gary and Patrick. Just then, Phoebe and Kyle rushed in and grabbed SpongeBob, followed by Tsunami herself. Seeing the villain, Sandy lost control and attacked, but Sue easily overpowered her and locked her in a cage. Sandy appealed to her former colleagues, who admitted they were bribed with a treat machine. The villain cut the conversation short and ordered SpongeBob into the cloning machine. While Bob was inside, Sue revealed her motives. As a child, she loved fish, but they always died when she took them out of the water to hug them. Her search for cuddly aquatic animals led her to piranhas, who left her only a hut, forcing her to get a robotic body. She then used Sam's invention to make her dream possible, making Sandy partly responsible for the kidnapping of Bikini Bottom. This upset Sandy greatly. SpongeBob was cloned, and Sue planned to raise the copies before releasing them. But Mr. Krabs caused Sue's cyborg dog to knock over the machine, spilling the SpongeBobs. One clone comforted Sandy, and Kyle and Phoebe overheard, realizing they should switch sides. Inspired, Sandy took control of Sue's robotic body, making her dance, then punched so hard her head flew off. The headless body hit the aquarium, and a mutant fish swallowed Sue's head, allowing her to become a water creature at last. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs discovered a way to restore SpongeBob by squishing the clones together. Squidward happily helped. Then disaster struck. The aquarium cracked. They had to return Bikini Bottom to the sea fast. Sandy tried her whistle, but couldn't. She had lost a tooth. SpongeBob whistled instead, summoning the Cheeks family, but even they couldn't lift the tank. Sandy then rallied her second family, SpongeBob, Patrick, and the others. She built a device powered by friends and relatives to lift the aquarium back into the ocean. Afterward, Sam's family performed an underwater circus act, joined by Kyle and Phoebe, now shrunk into the right size. Everyone loved the show.